The year is 2024. A man walks onto a stage in Buenos Aires holding a chainsaw. Not a metaphorical chainsaw, an actual gas-powered hardware store chainsaw. The crowd goes absolutely insane. His name is Javier Milei. He has wild hair like a 1980s rock star, discusses economic policy with his cloned dogs, and he's about to become the president of Argentina. But here's the thing. This isn't a comedy sketch. This is the most radical economic experiment of the 21st century. And before you laugh at the chainsaw guy, consider this. 1 year later, inflation dropped from 289% to 40%. The government posted its first budget surplus in 14 years. And global investors are suddenly very, very interested in Argentina again. But wait, there's another number. Poverty hit 53%. Beef consumption, in the country that literally invented the steakhouse, fell to its lowest level in recorded history. So what's the verdict? Is Milei a madman destroying a nation? Or is he the surgeon who finally had the guts to cut out the cancer that's been killing Argentina for a century? Today, we're not just looking at Milei. We're looking at the 100-year disease that made him possible. Because here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit. Argentina was once one of the richest countries on earth, and then it deleted itself. This is the forensic audit of the most spectacular economic suicide in modern history. This is how a paradise became a patient. 1. The Golden Age, when Argentina was king. Let me take you back, way back. The year is 1913. You're walking down the streets of Buenos Aires. The architecture rivals Paris. The cafes are packed. The opera house has just opened. It's bigger and more ornate than any theater in Europe. And if you look at the numbers, you'll find something shocking. Argentina is richer than France, richer than Germany, almost as rich as the United States. In 1913, Argentina's GDP per capita was in the global top 10. It was receiving 7% of all worldwide foreign investment. More immigrants were flooding into Buenos Aires than into New York. They called it the Paris of South America. And that wasn't flattery. It was a fact. The secret? Beef, grain, and timing. Argentina sat on the Pampas, one of the most fertile agricultural regions on the planet. When refrigerated ships were invented in the 1880s, Argentine beef could suddenly reach London dinner tables. The British invested billions. Railroads stretched across the country like arteries, pumping wealth into Buenos Aires. By 1900, Argentina had the largest railway network in the Americas outside the United States. Foreign capital was pouring in. The peso was as stable as the British pound. Here's a statistic that should blow your mind. In 1895, Argentina's GDP per capita was higher than Belgium, the Netherlands, Austria, and Italy combined. So what happened? How do you go from rivaling Switzerland to rivaling Zimbabwe? How do you default on your debt not once, not twice, but 9 times? How do you go through 21 IMF programs in 60 years, more than any other country on earth? The answer starts with one man, a colonel, and an ideology that would infect Argentina like a virus for the next 80 years. 2. The Perón Curse, how to destroy a miracle. The year is 1946. Juan Domingo Perón wins the presidency. He's charismatic, he's popular, and he's about to light a match that will burn for 8 decades. Perón looked at Argentina's wealth and said, "This belongs to the workers." And on paper, that sounds noble. But here's what he actually did. He nationalized the railroads. The British built arteries of Argentina's economy. He took over the banks. He seized control of trade. He created a system where the government bought crops from farmers at low prices and sold them abroad at high prices, pocketing the difference. The workers loved it. Wages rose 35% between 1945 and 1949. Unions became the most powerful force in the country. Evita became a saint. But here's the economics lesson Perón never learned. You can't eat your seed corn forever. The nationalized industries became bloated. The railroads that once made money now lost millions daily. Price controls strangled farmers. Why grow wheat when the government steals your profit? Production collapsed. By 1955, the military overthrew Perón. But here's the curse. The ideology survived. Peronism became a religion. Every politician since, left or right, has had to either embrace it or define themselves against it. And every time Argentina tried to reform, the Peronist unions, the Peronist voters, the Peronist mythology pulled it back. Think about this. By 1947, Argentina was still the 10th richest country in the world. By 1990, it had fallen out of the top 50. The country didn't experience a single war. No foreign invasion, no natural disaster destroyed it. Argentina destroyed Argentina. 3. The default machine, 9 times and counting. Let me read you a number that should terrify any economist. 21. That's how many times Argentina has gone to the IMF since 1956. 21 bailouts. That's not a country with bad luck. That's a country with a structural addiction. And the defaults? 9 times since independence in 1816. The biggest one came in 2001. Picture this. December 2001. The economy is collapsing. The peso is pegged to the dollar. A straitjacket suffocating exports. Unemployment is 25%. The government has burned through $40 billion in IMF loans trying to defend an exchange rate everyone knows is a lie. People start withdrawing their savings. The government panics. It freezes all bank accounts. Your money is there. You can see it on the screen, but you can't touch it. What happened next became famous worldwide. Argentines took to the streets banging pots and pans, the cacerolazo. 5 presidents cycled through in 2 weeks. On Christmas Eve 2001, Argentina defaulted on $141 billion in foreign debt. At the time, it was the largest sovereign default in human history. The peso lost 70% of its value overnight. Poverty exploded from 30% to over 50%. 9 million people, in a country of 37 million, suddenly lived on less than $2 a day. And here's the pattern nobody wants to talk about. Argentina always recovers. Commodity prices rise, the economy grows, people forget, politicians spend, debt accumulates, and then the next crisis hits. 2001 wasn't the first crash, it wasn't the last, it's just the most famous. The 2018 crisis under Macri, another $57 billion IMF loan, the largest in history, gone. The 2020 default under Fernandez, $65 billion restructured again. This isn't bad luck. This is a system designed to fail. 4. The inflation death spiral. When money becomes toilet paper. Now let's talk about the thing that truly broke Argentina's soul. Inflation. Americans complain when prices go up 5%. Imagine this. In 1989, Argentine inflation hit 3,000% annually. In some months, prices doubled every few weeks. People would get paid on Friday and sprint to the supermarket. By Monday, their paycheck was worth half as much. Store owners stopped putting prices on shelves. They changed too fast. Workers negotiated not for salary increases, but for more frequent paydays. What's the point of a raise if inflation eats it before you cash the check? The psychological damage this causes is impossible to overstate. Savings? Worthless. Planning for the future? Impossible. Trust in institutions? Destroyed. And every government promised to fix it. Menem in the 90s pegged the peso to the dollar. It worked until it exploded in 2001. Kirchner printed money to fund social programs. Inflation roared back. Macri tried austerity. The economy collapsed. Fernandez printed even more. Inflation hit 289%. By 2023, Argentina had the highest inflation rate on the planet. Higher than Venezuela. Higher than Zimbabwe. The peso had lost 99% of its value since 2018. People were buying dollars on the black market, hiding cash in mattresses, pricing things in blue dollars, the illegal rate that reflected reality rather than the government's fantasy. This is the economy Javier Milei inherited, not just broken, not just sick, dying. 5. The chainsaw arrives. Enter Milei. November 2023. The election results come in. Javier Milei wins with 56% of the vote. Who is this guy? He's an economist who spent years screaming on TV about inflation and government corruption. He called politicians thieves and parasites. He named his dogs after free market economists, Conan after Robert Lucas, Murray after Murray Rothbard. He claims to communicate with his dead dog through a medium. Yes, really. He called himself an anarcho-capitalist. He promised to abolish the central bank. He wanted to replace the peso with the US dollar. He carried a chainsaw to rallies and revved it while the crowd chanted. Most politicians would be laughed out of the room, but Argentina wasn't laughing anymore. They were desperate. When you've lived through 9 defaults, 5 currency collapses, and annual inflation that hit 289%, a guy with a chainsaw starts to sound reasonable. Afuera! Milei would scream. Out! Throw them all out. And on December 10th, 2023, they did. 6. The cuts. What the chainsaw actually hit. Day 1 in office, Milei didn't hesitate. First, he devalued the peso by 54%. In one stroke, the official exchange rate went from a government fantasy to something approaching reality. It was brutal. Prices exploded overnight. December 2023 inflation hit 25.5% in a single month. Then came the chainsaw. He slashed the number of government ministries from 18 to 8, 12 entire ministries. Gone. The Ministry of Women, the Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of Science, eliminated or absorbed. He fired 35,000 government workers in his first year. Plans called for 70,000 more. He froze public sector wages below inflation, meaning real salaries dropped by double digits. He eliminated energy subsidies. Electricity bills in Buenos Aires went up 300%. Gas bills, 400%. He cancelled all public infrastructure projects. Highways under construction, stopped. Housing programs, frozen. He ended 200,000 social welfare plans he claimed were corrupt. People getting paid to show up at political rallies. Ghost employees who existed only on paper. Remember the golden chainsaw photo? That wasn't a joke. Milei posed with his entire cabinet behind a literal golden chainsaw, captioned, "The best government in history." He wasn't trying to reform Argentina. He was trying to amputate the infected limb. 7. The pain. When the medicine burns. And burn it did. In the first half of 2024, poverty hit 53%, more than half the country, officially poor. That's the highest recorded jump in 2 decades. Extreme poverty, people who can't afford basic food, reached 18%, 6 million Argentines. The economy contracted. GDP fell nearly 4% in 2024. The recession was brutal, especially for the working class. And here's where it gets personal. Beef consumption, the soul of Argentine identity, the thing they built an economy on, dropped to 48 kilograms per person, the lowest in recorded history. In the land of the asado, families couldn't afford steak anymore. University budgets were frozen at 2023 levels, which, with 200% plus inflation, meant effectively slashed by 2/3. Students protested. Professors went on strike. Hospitals reported shortages. Pensioners, who'd worked their whole lives, watched their fixed incomes melt away as prices rose faster than adjustments. The streets of Buenos Aires saw protests, strikes, tear gas. For the first few months, the airport was empty. Trains stopped. Garbage piled up as workers walked off the job. And Milei's response? There is no money. The previous governments lied to you. They paid for your votes with money that didn't exist. Now the bill has come due. He predicted a V-shaped recovery. Sharp pain, then rapid growth. But first, he said, Argentines had to understand the truth about how badly they'd been deceived. 8. The results. The numbers don't lie. And now, the numbers, because this is where it gets complicated. Inflation. When Milei took office, 289% annual. By November 2024, 2.4% monthly, the lowest in over 4 years. By mid-2025, annual inflation had dropped below 40%. This is not a small achievement. This is the holy grail of Argentine politics, the thing every president promised and none delivered. Budget surplus. For the first time in 14 years, Argentina's government spent less than it collected. 12 consecutive months of surplus. The IMF called it better than expected. Stock market. The Merval Index, Argentina's benchmark, rose 172% in 2024. Investors are flooding back. Currency reserves. The central bank started rebuilding its dollar reserves after years of hemorrhaging. Country risk. The premium investors' demand to lend to Argentina fell from 2,000 basis points when Milei took office to around 700, the lowest in 5 years. And poverty? After peaking at 53%, it started falling. By mid-2025, it was back down to 31.6%, still terrible, but falling faster than anyone expected. Here's what Milei's believers say. The pain was necessary. The previous model was a lie, a house of cards built on printed money and debt that eventually collapsed anyway. At least now the foundation is solid. Here's what the critics say. You can't shock therapy your way out of poverty. Real wages fell. Consumption collapsed. The poor bore the cost while the wealthy, with their dollars and investments, got richer. Both are true. That's what makes this complicated. 9. The verdict. The trial of the century. So here we are, January 2026. What's the verdict? Let me give you both closing arguments. The prosecution says Milei took a sick patient and performed surgery without anesthesia. Poverty spiked to 53%. Millions of Argentines went hungry. Public services collapsed. Universities starved. Hospitals ran out of supplies. And all this pain fell on the people who could least afford it, while the wealthy parked their money in dollars and rode out the storm. Furthermore, the miracle of falling inflation came largely from crushing demand. People aren't buying things because they can't afford to. That's not a cure. That's a coma. The prosecution rests. The defense says, every previous government promised to fix inflation. They all failed. They spent money they didn't have, printed pesos until they were worthless, and left the next government with an even bigger mess. Milei did what no one else had the political courage to do. He stopped lying. He stopped printing. He stopped pretending there was free money. And within 1 year, inflation collapsed from the highest in the world to something approaching normal. Yes, there was pain, but there was always going to be pain. The previous model was a cancer. You don't cure cancer with aspirin. And look at the trend. Poverty is falling. The economy is growing. Investment is returning. For the first time in decades, Argentina has a chance, not a guarantee, but a chance, at real stability. The defense rests. 10. The final word. What Argentina teaches the world. So what's the real lesson here? Argentina isn't just an economic case study. It's a warning. In 1913, it was one of the richest countries on earth. It had everything. Land, resources, education, infrastructure, immigration, and it destroyed it all. Not through war, not through natural disaster, through politics, through promising people things that couldn't be paid for, through printing money to paper over problems, through blaming foreigners and markets and speculation while the fundamentals rotted, through creating a system where connections mattered more than competence, where political loyalty was rewarded more than productivity, where every solution was temporary and every crisis was someone else's fault. This is what happens when a country lives beyond its means for decades. The bill always comes due. The only question is, who pays it? Milei may be crazy. He talks to dead dogs. He screams on TV. He waves chainsaws at rallies. But crazy or not, he's doing something no Argentine leader has done in generations. He's telling the truth about the math. Whether that's enough to save Argentina, we won't know for years. But the world is watching. Because if Milei succeeds, every struggling economy on earth will want to know how. And if he fails, every politician who promised there's no alternative will point to Buenos Aires and say, "See, I told you so." Argentina is the laboratory. The experiment is running, and the results, for better or worse, will be written in the lives of 45 million people. 11. The alternative universe. What if? All right, let's play a game. Let's imagine an alternative timeline, a universe where Argentina didn't wait 100 years, where some president in the 1990s or 2000s did what Milei is doing now. What would Argentina look like today? Buckle up, because this is where it gets really interesting. The 2001 turning point. Remember 2001? The largest default in history. 5 presidents in 2 weeks. The peso crashed 70%. But here's what most people forget. After the default, Argentina could have gone 2 ways. The first path, the one they chose. Néstor Kirchner came to power in 2003. He rode the commodity boom. Soy, wheat, beef were all expensive. Money poured in, and instead of reforming the economy, he started spending. Subsidies, social programs, nationalization of pension funds, price controls, manipulation of inflation statistics. When commodity prices fell, everything collapsed again. But imagine the second path. Imagine that in 2003, Argentina did what Chile did. The Chilean miracle that could have happened in Argentina. Let's look at Chile more closely. In 1973, Chile was in chaos. Hyperinflation, deficits, nationalized enterprises running at a loss. Sound familiar? Then came the Chicago Boys, a group of economists trained at the University of Chicago under Milton Friedman. They implemented shock therapy. Privatization, open markets, an independent central bank, fiscal discipline. Was it painful? Damn painful. Unemployment soared, protests, social tension. But you know what happened next? By the 1990s, Chile became the most stable economy in Latin America. GDP per capita quadrupled. Poverty fell from 45% to 11%. Inflation, single digits, for years. When Argentina was going through its 2001 default, Chile was calmly growing at 4 to 5% per year. When Argentina was printing pesos and manipulating statistics, the Chilean peso was one of the most stable currencies in the region. Today, Chile is the only Latin American country admitted to the OECD, the club of rich nations. Argentina is not. The difference? One country reformed, the other didn't. The Polish miracle, another path Argentina missed. Want another example? Look at Poland. 1989, the fall of communism, Poland in ruins, hyperinflation at 600%, empty shelves, bread lines. What did they do? Leszek Balcerowicz, the Polish finance minister, implemented what they called shock therapy, literally overnight. He freed prices, made the zloty convertible, cut subsidies, opened the economy to foreign investment. The first year was hell. GDP fell 11%. Unemployment shot up to 16%. People took to the streets. But within 2 years, the economy started growing, and it didn't stop for 28 consecutive years until COVID. Today, Poland is the 6th largest economy in the EU. GDP per capita has increased sixfold since 1990. Warsaw looks like Western Europe. And Argentina? In 1990, Argentina and Poland had roughly the same GDP per capita. Today, Poland is 1.5 times richer. Both countries started from crisis. One reformed, the other kept re-electing Peronists. The Estonian miracle, a small country, a big lesson. And here's one more example that should make Argentina weep. Estonia, a tiny country, 1.3 million people, in 1991, part of the collapsed USSR. What did they do? Radical reforms, fixed exchange rate to the German mark, flat income tax, minimal regulation, digitization of everything. The result? Estonia became one of the most innovative economies in the world. Skype was created there. E-government, e-residency. GDP per capita grew from $2,000 in 1992 to $28,000 today. And Argentina, $13,000, a country with the pampas, oil, lithium, and 45 million educated people, poorer than tiny Estonia, which has nothing but pine trees and programmers. The Brazilian miracle that could have happened in Argentina. But let's look at an example even closer to home, literally across the border. Brazil. In 2016, Brazil was in terrible shape. President Dilma Rousseff was impeached for budget manipulation. The Lava Jato corruption scandal brought down the political elite. The economy was shrinking for the second consecutive year. Double-digit inflation. The real was falling. Sound familiar? That's basically a description of any given year in Argentina. But Brazil did something Argentina never did. In 2021, they granted their central bank legal independence, not just rhetorically, legislatively. The central bank chief got a fixed term that doesn't align with the presidential term. The president could no longer fire him for wrong policies. What happened? When inflation started accelerating during COVID, Brazil's central bank didn't wait for permission from Brasilia. They started raising rates in spring 2021, months before the U.S. Federal Reserve even acknowledged inflation was a problem. Rates rose from 2% in early 2021 to 13.75% by August 2022. Brutal. Damn brutal. Loans became expensive. Businesses suffered. People complained. But it worked. By 2023, while Argentina was battling 140% inflation, Brazilian inflation had dropped to 4%. While the peso was losing 50% per year, the real strengthened. While Argentines were hiding dollars in mattresses, Brazilians were calmly planning for the future. And here's the really painful part. Brazil and Argentina started the 2000s at roughly the same level. Both commodity economies, both with histories of inflation and instability, both with corrupt elites and populist politicians. The difference? Brazil let economists do their job, Argentina didn't. Today, Brazil is the 8th largest economy in the world. Argentina isn't even in the top 25. The 2015 turning point, Macri's missed chance. But wait, Argentina had another chance, very recently. 2015, Mauricio Macri wins the election. The first non-Peronist in 12 years, a businessman, a free marketeer. He promised reforms. And he actually started. He lifted currency controls. The peso fell, but it was truth, not fantasy. He negotiated with the vulture creditors, who had been suing Argentina for 15 years. He reopened the country to international capital markets. Investors applauded, money flowed in. It seemed like Argentina was finally on the right path. But Macri made a fatal mistake. He didn't touch the subsidies, didn't shrink the government, didn't reform labor laws. He tried gradualism, slow, incremental reforms so as not to anger voters. That's like treating cancer with a diet. The budget deficit remained. The government kept spending more than it earned. To cover the difference, they borrowed. In 2018, when the Fed started raising rates and the dollar strengthened, investors fled Argentina. Macri went to the IMF. He got the largest loan in history, $57 billion. It didn't help. By 2019, inflation was breaking records again. The peso crashed. Macri lost the election to the Peronists. All the reforms were rolled back. $57 billion evaporated. Imagine the alternative. Imagine if Macri had done in 2016 what Milei is doing in 2024. Sharp subsidy cuts, government layoffs, an independent central bank with a mandate for 3% inflation. Yes, there would have been social unrest, protests, falling approval ratings. But by 2019, instead of 50% inflation, it would have been 5%. Instead of $57 billion in IMF debt, a budget surplus. Instead of capital flight, an influx of investment. Macri could have won the 2019 election, could have completed the reforms, could have made Argentina a normal country 5 years earlier. But he got scared, chose gradualism, and lost everything. Why do some countries reform and others don't? Here's a question that has puzzled economists for decades. Chile reformed, Poland reformed, Estonia reformed, Brazil, at least partially, reformed. Argentina didn't. Why? There's a theory that it's about the depth of the crisis. Poland in 1989 was so destroyed that there was simply no alternative to reform. Empty shelves convince better than any economist. Argentina never fell deep enough. After every crisis, a small recovery. Soy prices rise, and you can go a few more years without reforming. Then the next crisis, and so on in circles. There's a theory that it's about political institutions. In Chile, reforms were carried out by a dictatorship, brutal but effective. In Poland, there was elite consensus after the fall of communism. In Argentina, eternal war between Peronists and anti-Peronists. Every 4 or 8 years, power changes, and the new government reverses everything the previous one did. But maybe it's simpler. Maybe Argentina just didn't get lucky with leaders. Until Milei. Alternative Argentina, 2003, the reform path. Now let's return to our alternative universe. 2003. Argentina has just experienced the largest default in history. The peso is devalued. Debts are restructured. In our reality, Kirchner started spending. But imagine instead an Argentine Balcerowicz came to power, or an Argentine Chicago boy, and he did the following. 2003-2005. Independent central bank. Inflation targeting. No money printing to cover deficits. 2005-2010. Privatization of remaining state enterprises. Simplified labor laws. Lower business taxes. 2010-2015. Opening the economy. Trade agreements with the EU, US, Asia. Foreign investment flowing into agriculture, energy, technology. 2015-2020. Development of Vaca Muerta, the largest shale oil deposit outside the United States. Energy exports. What would Argentina look like in this universe by 2025? Let's do the math. If Argentina had grown at Chilean rates, averaging 4% per year, instead of its miserable 1%, its GDP per capita today would be not $13,000, but around $25,000. That's Portugal level, or Czech Republic. Poverty would be not 30%, but 10-15%. Inflation, 3 to 5%, not 40%. The peso would be a stable currency, not toilet paper. Argentina would be in the OECD, maybe even at the G20, not as a perpetual debtor, but as a real player. That's what was stolen. Not by war, not by natural disaster, by politics. And what if Milei fails? But let's consider another alternative, a dark one. What if Milei doesn't succeed? Imagine 2027. Inflation starts creeping back up. The recession drags on. Poverty isn't falling. The Peronists return to power with the slogan, "See, we told you, you can't cut social programs." They turn the printing press back on, bring back price controls, nationalize again. And by 2030, Argentina is back at the IMF, the 22nd bailout program. and by 2035, the 10th default. This isn't fantasy. This is a pattern that has repeated for 100 years. A lesson for everyone. You know what makes Argentina's story so important. It proves that wealth is not a guarantee. Natural resources are not a guarantee. An educated population is not a guarantee. You can have everything and lose it all. Not in a generation, over decades of gradual erosion. Chile, Poland, Estonia, they proved that shock therapy can work. That pain can be temporary and results can be permanent. Argentina has spent 100 years proving the opposite, that avoiding pain today guarantees catastrophe tomorrow. Milei isn't just an experiment for Argentina. He's an answer to the question, can you break a century-long cycle? If yes, this is a roadmap for dozens of countries stuck in the same trap. If no, this is a verdict. Proof that some systems can't be reformed. They can only be survived. If you found this deep dive valuable, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps this video get past the algorithm and reach more people who need to understand what's really happening. And hit subscribe if you want to be here for the next chapter. Because trust me, the story of how Argentina rebuilds or how it collapses again is going to be just as wild as the story of how it fell. I'll see you in the comments. And remember, economics isn't just about money, it's about life.